What time are you gonna kick people out?
Usually goes to about 7:15, 7:30.
My mind is being blown. Okay, so my husband, and you guys sing until they're taken. They can probably bring them out.
Hi everyone, welcome to Zibby's Bookshop, and thank you for coming out tonight. We're about to get started. Everyone should just take a seat. So as you all know, we're here tonight to celebrate the launch of There Are No Rules for This by J.J. Elliott. So congratulations, J.J. And she's here in conversation with Hope Edelman, author of Motherless Daughters. And it's going to be up 30 minutes of conversation between the two of them, followed by audience Q&A and then a book signing. And you guys have been so great. We're already running low on copies of There Are No Rules for This. So if you do want one, make sure you go up and grab your copy before we sell out.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the bookstore.
Yes.
What a great addition to Santa Monica. Thank you for having us, and congratulations to JJ on the publication of her first book. A lot of you already know JJ, but I'm here to also to tell you that she is an exceptional writer, a wonderful human being. She is born and raised in Northern California. JJ got a degree in English from UCLA before it was heretical to get a degree in English from any university in the country. Lived and worked in Los Angeles as a copywriter in ad agencies and also in Northern California before embarking on a new career or an additional career as a novelist. So we're here today to talk about her first novel, There Are No Rules for This, which was published by She Writes Press. And we'll jump right in. I'm, as was just said, I'm Hope Edelman. I am a local author. I am the author of Motherless Daughters, Letters from Motherless Daughters, Motherless Mothers, The Afterlife. I am the founder at motherlessdaughters.com. I provide services to and programs to women who lost mothers at an early age. And I also teach and write memoir and personal essays. And I'm thrilled to be here today to celebrate with JJ. So I thought I'd begin with the question that every novelist gets, and I apologize in advance, but I'm endlessly interested in it. I imagine some of you are too, which is how did you come up with this story in your imagination? Because with memoir, when I'm teaching memoir, we are pulling material from real life and shaping it into story. But I don't write fiction, and I'm so interested in how a story comes into being just from one's imagination. What is the genesis, if you don't mind talking about this, because I'm sure you're asked all the time.
No.
What was the genesis of the story and how did it develop?
I'm going to tell you all about that. And I'm not asked that all the time because this book only just came out. So I feel like this is new to me to talk about it. But I want to also just say that Hope's book, Motherless Daughters, I picked up when I was in my 20s as a new motherless daughter. And it was like a lifeline. So I only met Hope in February here at this bookstore. So this is this insane kind of full circle moment for me where like I'm meeting and in conversation with an idol of mine who I've now come to know well and have shared a lot with. So this is beyond amazing and special for me. Just need to get to say that and be like, thank you, Hope, because your book and the things that you have written have been their medicine and their healing for people. So, yeah, no, it's true. So I'll say, so the reason, okay, so I'm that polar opposite. I have no interest in writing memoir, zero. And but I'm a copywriter, and I've been a copywriter in advertising for many, many years. And people always say, "Oh, you're a writer, you're a copywriter, you must want to write a book." And I was always like, "No, I have nothing to write about, zero interest." And then I was sitting at my desk in my agency job in San Francisco one day, and the idea for this book like came almost downloaded. It was like, there's 4 women, one of them dies by suicide, they have their families who are still alive. Go. It felt like that. And I didn't tell anybody because I felt like I didn't really know if I didn't even know if I could do it. And I didn't know. So yes. So I went off, I was like I was having a little affair. I was like going off into like a wine bar after work and writing this novel. And I wrote the first 30 pages they're pretty much unedited, and if you read it, and they came out like downloaded again. And so I thought it was going to be easy. And then everything else was not easy. So thank God it was like enough came to me quickly that it kept me wanting to chase this story. But I can't explain how that happened. I mean, it is so I lost my mother to suicide when I was 17. So then I worked on the hotlines for years when I was in my 20s. So I've lived with this knowledge of this subject, but I never necessarily thought I was going to do anything with it, especially not fiction. And then when it all came together, it was like coalesced and just like handed to me, which I can't explain.
You said the first 30 pages came easily and the rest was not easy.
Yeah.
What was the not easy part?
210. I mean, there would be set scenes that would feel like that, where you feel like you're like, oh, I don't even really know where this is coming from, and those are really fun, and it was so exciting when that would happen. But I want to say over the years, I mean, that is like 10%, and the rest of it is really just like, okay, plodding along, and what are these gals doing now, and what's the next thing they need to do? I knew where we needed to go, but how we got there was just, it was effort. But I mean, not bad effort, just effort.
Well, you take the reader on such an interesting journey with this book structurally, because in what we call story time, in the writing classroom, the story begins right after their friend has died and follows them for several months afterwards. But in between, we move around in time, anywhere from like 8 months earlier to 4 months before the death. And so we have one storyline that is, in the present, and then another one that's moving all over, giving us the backstory and the context for the friendships. And what made you decide to structure it that way?
So the first backstory was, it comes very quickly. It's the character Max is getting engaged. That was part of those 30 pages. So it was almost like this book wanted to be told this way. And as I moved along, I wasn't necessarily married to it, but as I moved along, I realized that if I told only the story in the present tense, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And we need those past tense moments. Also, we know Fanny's gone within the first few pages. It's not a spoiler that she dies by suicide. So we needed to see her. We weren't going to be able to see her if we didn't go back a bunch of times and see her, and also just get to know her and get to know her story that wasn't being told by her present tense friends who've lost her. So she needed her story to come out more naturally. I will say though that as far as when things happen, the flashbacks always just kind of like I would write them, and then there was this one point in time where I think I printed everything out and then like had them spread all over my house and then trying to figure out like which would come first and what made sense and when it came in the book and how many years ago. It was totally like it was like a Tetris puzzle.
You know, what's so interesting is I was thinking about this, you know, like the anti-Big Chill.
Mhm.
Because in the Big Chill, as you remember in that film, we never get to know the person who died.
Oh, that's so funny.
He's just there sort of in the background, and we only know about him through the mourning of his close group of friends.
Mhm.
But this is different because we really get to know Fee,
Mhm.
and we get to see why these friends loved her so much and what they lost, which is what a lot of people come to my memoir classes when they want to write about loss.
Yeah.
Often the loss of a mother, but not exclusively.
Mhm.
And we can't really appreciate what the protagonist lost unless we get to see who that person was to them in life.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you render so beautifully, because each of these women have a different relationship with her too. And they're such distinctive characters. Max, Liddy, Allie, who's the main protagonist, is told mostly from her point of view. What did you draw from to create these characters? Like, are they based on people that you know? Are they parts of yourself? Novelists say that all characters are parts of themselves, but I don't know is that true?
Yeah, it is. But I will say I have friends who will literally like take a picture of like a passage and they'll be like, "Is this me?" I think this is me. And I'll be like, maybe. And friends, I mean, like I have had friends be like, "I think that's me," and I'm like, "Yeah, you definitely inspired that." But I will say that. So Allie, who's I think people will say, "Oh, you must have been Allie," or you must have related the most with Allie, and I'm like, well, she had never known loss before Phoebe died, and I've known loss my entire life, pretty much my entire adult life. So I don't know that I can. I mean, I'm sure there's parts of me in there because it's the protagonist, but I think there's parts of me in everything, and there's also parts of so many people I know. Phoebe was definitely. There was a lot of my mom in Feeney, but she's not my mom. But that little like spark of kind of always wanting to make some magical thing happen with her friends was very much my mom, which also might be a little bit bipolar, which I think she probably was, both my mom and this character. So yeah.
Because you never come out and
No.
hypothesize about
No,
that.
because I don't think either one of them were ever diagnosed because they never sought the help that they needed. But to me, that sense of like, kind of this, like, it's magical to be in the wheelhouse of somebody that wants to create that kind of magic for you. But it's also maybe not super normal. So I think, and they didn't necessarily see her depressive states that much, where it's like she could bring the magic and get the response and get the adrenaline, get the dopamine she wanted. Like my mom would do crazy things with me, like, let's have a snowball fight with socks in the middle of the family room when I was an only child. So it's like, okay. But I mean, I didn't do that with my kids. Sorry, kiddos. So there was this, I grew up with that sense of kind of magic coming at me all the time. But in retrospect, I think that it was probably a piece of mania.
Phoebe's family also didn't seem to be that privy to, or at least in the book, we get a sense that they weren't privy to her depressive states. Did you see that in your house, or did your mom just seem like magic to you? Like, what did you draw from to create Phoebe's character?
Well, so in my house, so I was, like I said, I was an only child until I was 14, but I mean, I basically raised as an only child. And then, so there would basically, my mom would be this like magical, creative force to everyone. It wasn't just to me. I would see as her child, her sleeping a lot in the day, her not being able, her like forgetting to pick me up at school, things that now that I'm a mom, I'm like, oh, that's not normal. I didn't realize that wasn't normal because I didn't know what was normal at the time as a kid. And even my dad wasn't necessarily seeing that, and I wouldn't even know to vocalize that. So I think you can hide that stuff pretty easily, because unless people have the vocabulary and like the understanding to know what they're looking at. I also think that the magic outshines the dark stuff, or the lower energy stuff, because it feels like you're getting a lot. And okay, so you don't think we have in school. I mean, that wasn't great at the time, but I didn't understand it.
And the magic outshining the dark stuff, I see that so much in your story too, because it's not a story about suicide, it's a story about friendship.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a story about love.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you had a publishing journey or odyssey to get this book out into the world, and I was wondering how many people in the audience are writers or want to write a book or are in the middle of writing a book? Oh, quite a few. So let's talk a little bit about your publishing journey. That might be really interesting for people here to know about it.
Totally.
Because it's unconventional in some ways, but also rather predictable in others, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I wrote this book and I queried and got an agent, and that's its own beastly journey. But it was not like an easy thing. I got it. By the time I got my agent, and she was super excited about the book, and she was like, "We're going to go to all these top 5," and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm in the home clear. Like I'm on the treadmill. Everything's happening," and we did do all those things, and we got a lot of really beautifully complimentary rejections that loved the book, loved the characters, loved the writing, but then it was but there was always something. And what my agent and I kind of hashed out together was that we think that there was a lot of hesitancy in the traditional publishing world to treat a suicide without a reasonable understanding of why it happened. And I, very much from what I know and from working on the hotlines and from just doing my research, I wasn't willing to provide that. And so I took the story back, and from my agent, no hard feelings, but I was like, I don't think that, and she said to me, JJ, it is getting harder and harder in traditional publishing for debut authors that don't have a traditional platform. They don't have a platform of influencers. You don't already have readers to get a contract. It's just getting harder. So my first thing I did was send it to the hybrid publisher, She Writes Press, who published this. And I wasn't sure that they were going to pick it up. And so I was going to also then maybe query again and look for somebody that was willing to maybe take a less traditional route on the storyline. And She Writes picked it up immediately, and we're like, we love it, we believe in it, and it's going to be published in spring 2023. So it was very much finding somebody that was willing to tell the story the way I wanted to tell it.
Can you tell the group, for those who don't know, what a hybrid publisher is?
Yes. So hybrid publishing is, they kind of talk about it like the Netflix of publishing, where it's like, so authors, they have connections with all the traditional outlets. We pay them a fee to get our books. So they have to accept that it's vetted. They have to accept your manuscript. And then they're like, okay, you pay us this amount, and then we will get you into all the traditional outlets, but I have to do my own publicity. I have to do my own social media publicity and everything. So a lot of the onus is on the creator. However, a lot of the control is in the creator's hands, which isn't true in traditional publishing, which we were just talking about. Yeah. And so for those, most traditional authors who are being published, they get an advance. It could be a good advance, it could be a not that great advance. You don't really have control over it, other than accepting it or not accepting it. Most of them don't ever make any money beyond that advance, because you have to make that advance back for the publisher before you even start to get royalties. And even those royalties are pretty small margin. Whereas
10 to 15% usually.
Whereas She Writes, it's like 75.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like
So
75 that you get,
I
and 25%. So you can earn back your initial investment.
Yeah.
Fast, quickly.
Yes. So there's more author control, there's more author royalties on the back end, but there's I have to put a lot of my skin in the game up front before I even see anything. And there's no guarantees of anything, as there is with any published book. But so that's the difference between And that's the difference between also self, which is
Yeah.
there aren't really the guardrails or the gatekeepers, and you don't have. I mean, so I had like a designer who worked with my cover. I had an editor. I had proofreader. I had all those things.
But you got to publish the book as you wanted to publish
Yeah,
it. You
they
did
didn't
not
have
have
any
to
content
compromise
changes.
on that story.
The only thing they wanted to change was the title, and I was okay with that. I was like, as long as I can keep everything else going on, I'm fine with changing the title. Yeah.
And the original title was?
The original title was This Thing Called Life, which came from the Prince quote, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to get through this thing called life," which I love, connected to my book. And those of you who read it understand why that's such a great quote. But to their point, it doesn't jump off the shelf as something where I'm like, what is that? This thing. I don't know. I understood why they did. It's almost like you have to read the quote and understand what the book's about to really put the whole puzzle together. And I think this might be a little bit more compelling for somebody who's just standing in a bookstore.
I think you're right. I think after you read the book, this
Yeah.
thing called Life makes sense.
I know. And everyone's like, that's a better title.
But to sell the book, because there really are no rules for this, are there? I mean, these women, Feeney's death remains a surprise and a mystery throughout the whole book. And these women are just kind of trying to figure it out day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there really are, I mean, I hadn't even thought about it until right now, but it's almost like there are no rules for this getting published.
No, nobody knows anything,
No.
you know?
No,
Really?
no.
I want to talk a little bit about your dialogue in here, because dialogue is, I feel like as a writer, my weakest point. And you're so good at the dialogue. It's so believable. It's so natural. How do you do that?
So I think what I do is I literally like jump into these bodies and like jump around these bodies. And I do like video games. So there's part of me that likes to do that. But I also have realized, because somebody made a comment to me recently about this, and they're like, how are you so good at that? And I'm like, I think it's because I'm a weird only child that spent so much time in my own head with like people having conversations with people, because I didn't have any peers that I lived with, that I really think that had something to do with it. I spent so much time in my imagination as a kid. I think that plays into my being able to write dialogue. Yeah, but I would really literally like, even when I think about these characters, I see them all as if I'm looking out of their bodies. So when I would write from them, I would be like, I'm them, and I'm thinking about them and what's their whole world. And then I would jump out to the next person and think about their whole world. Yeah.
I know that you did not write this book completely by yourself. You did not sit in a room completely alone to do this, and no writer has to, although that's sort of like the glorified image of a writer. But you found your own community. What made, and maybe you can tell the room about that and what that experience was like for you, and what made you reach out to find support while you were writing the book?
Yeah. So when I first started writing my book, and I didn't tell anyone about it, even my own husband, when I finally decided I was going to come clean with my big secret, I told him, and he said, oh, you should, he of course was like so supportive. He's like, you should go on a retreat. And I realized that I had read Laura Munson's There Are No Rules for This. Laura's who introduced me to Hope, right outside this.
No, your book is There Are No Rules for This.
Oh, sorry.
Laura's is-
Sorry. This is not the story you think it is, which sounds similar. Oh my gosh. And Laura introduced me to Hope standing right out front there. And so I loved that book so much that when I found out she had a retreat, I decided to go on that retreat really early on. And I brought my first 30 pages that like were easy to write, and I brought them. And I wanted to know if I was insane. And I had a one-on-one with her, and she said to me
that you are insane for wanting to write a book,
Yeah,
but
she
you're
said I'm
a good
insane.
writer and should write it.
she should have said that. That's more the truth.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's so true. She said to me, I read this as a reader, not an editor. And that doesn't happen to me very often. And this is going to be a book, and you're going to be published, and I'm going to be at your book event.
Wow.
And she was at my book event in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. And it's as crazy as it feels sitting here with you, Hope. It's like these literal mentors, people I've looked towards for so long, are now my friends and people I talk to. And I feel like that's been the journey of writing this book. I've met all these authors. I've met all these other writers. I have this kind of cohort of aspiring authors that we're all starting to publish together, which is, and we're all different ages. We have all different subject matters, all different kinds of writing, but it's such a supportive. I think writing is so isolating, as you know, and it's like you really do need to find your people on the way and help each other out. So yeah, no, I feel there's a part of me that's like, if this had never even been published, the people I've met that I can call friends and mentors, it's worth it. It was so worth it. So for those of you who are aspiring writers, I mean, reach out, like literally find your idols, find your mentors, reach out to them. They're people that want to hear from you, and you will end up knowing them and learning from them. Yeah.
For anyone in the room who's writing a book or feeling stuck writing a book or wants to write a book but hasn't started yet, I always believe that like 50% of getting started is giving yourself permission.
Totally.
And believing that you have a story that's worth telling. So how did you as an advertising copywriter give yourself permission to write a novel? You know, it's kind of a sideways shift, but it's also, it takes courage and guts to do that.
It takes so much more courage
And you
and guts.
said you didn't even tell your husband at
No,
first.
no.
Tell us about that.
Well, writing advertising copy is, I think, really fun. It feels like solving a puzzle. It's like someone's like, here's your subject matter, here's what they want you to talk about, here's your tone, and make some great headlines. To me, it feels more like problem solving than it's not like fiction writing. And at the end of the day, sure, do I fall in love with my copy and then I'm sad when they reject it? Yeah, but it's like, it's not the end of the world. It's my heart's not there that far into it. So whereas with this, it's like you're like bleeding onto the page. So it's very, very different how I feel about it, even when I'm working on it and when I'm sharing it, for sure. I will say copywriting, I think, is a really good muscle building exercise for writing lean copy or writing leanly, which I think is good. And I mean, listen, I like a flowery novel too, but I think that these sell maybe a little bit better. People respond to them better when it's not like when it keeps you moving along. But it is a very different beast. But I will say, writing, if you love to write, just write. It doesn't really matter what you're writing. I mean, I loved to write as a kid poetry, and I used to write a ton of it, and then I started writing, which kind of makes sense with copywriting because it's, again, shorter. And then when I started working, I stopped writing altogether, and I had a therapist who, when my kids were little, and she said, what you have a lot going on. You have a job, you have kids. What do you do for you? And I was like, nothing. I'm like, I work out, I take baths. And she's like, no. What do you do for you? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, what did you used to do? And I said, I used to write. And that's what got me starting this. Because I just was like, what if I just sat down and started to write something? And then it happened that helped that like right around the same time the idea came. And then I'm like, I'm just gonna play with it and see what happens. So it really I never felt like this will be published. It was more like, I just really want to get the story right. And I want to get it out, and then I'll figure it out.
I always find sending a book out into the world, it's like you have, like you said, you have bled on the page. You send it out into the world, it becomes a commodity. It's no longer like your baby. It is now being raised by lots of other people,
right?
Some of whom you don't know, which is startling,
right?
Yeah. But then, are you gonna, do it again?
Yeah.
Like, do you miss it? Because I find like, that absorption and that total focus and getting in the flow and then handing it over, it's like, it is kind of like giving birth, but it's like, then you want to do it again.
Yeah, I totally want to do it
another
again.
idea?
But again, yes, I do. I have a few. I'm really excited to do it again. But again, just like giving birth, you don't want to do it right away. You need a minute.
Yeah.
This is all very new. I'm still finding out if this baby is cute. Like, if you just feel like you're like, I made this baby, is it cute? Do you guys like my baby? I'm still, but no, I'm getting really good response. And I do want to do it again. And I do have a bunch of thoughts. But the thing that's interesting is that I don't probably have a book in me that's as personal as this. So it's going to be different. But I'm ready to, I think it might be really fun and interesting. It might not be like, and maybe that'll be easier to write if it's not so close to my heart.
And you learn so much about storytelling and publishing. I mean, it's such a big learning curve.
Yeah.
It's almost a shame not to do it again.
I know.
Right?
I can't imagine it will take the same amount of time if I do it again. It could, but I hope not, but yeah.
I think we can open for, it's 6:37, we've got time for questions. And there's so many people here, it's really, thank you all, I want to say, for showing up on a Tuesday evening and supporting writers. You know, sort of publishers believe that people don't come to bookstores anymore and they don't want to
Come
invest
to
in
bookstores.
those tours, but look at all of you here tonight. We're so grateful that you're here, and I imagine some of you might have some questions inspired by the conversation or from reading the
I have a
book.
question first. Can we open the door?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yes.
getting
It is very
It's
close.
getting really hot. Yeah,
Is that okay with you guys? Okay.
Turn the arrow.
That'll be
Oh,
bless you,
Edelman.
thank you.
I'm just a lot of,
moving over this
there's a lot of bodies, and I'm so
And
thankful for them, but they're
These
hot.
were saved, but they're not coming.
Oh,
no, I'm gonna go back.
So does anyone want to ask any questions for JJ or give her any feedback or share any of your publishing knowledge or stories?
Questions, anybody? That's okay, no.
Congratulations, JJ. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited to do the fun. And I would like you to
Oh, yeah, I'm doing all that after.
Okay, good. And I just have to say your inspiration, because I feel like I started and stopped 5 different projects and you're still stopped. So you're an inspiration. Congrats.
Yes, sir.
I think you said on record that this took you about 8 years from start to finish. During that time, was there any point where you felt like, I give up? I'm not gonna continue this.
No, because then I would be like giving up on all the years that I had gotten that far. You know, it's interesting you say that, Natasha, because if I had had like 5 different projects going on, I might have. I didn't. I had this one, and felt very committed to it. Felt very committed to these characters. I would have felt like I was letting them down. So I kind of had to get it done. Like I said, I didn't necessarily know what that meant at the end, but I needed to get this done for sure. Yeah. Yes.
What was it like to work on this book reason or something?
From my child. Oh my God.
Were they neglected?
What was it like for you? No, it was great because actually my characters have children, and I was learning along with them, and I also think it was good for my kiddos to see me, committed to this thing, and there were times where I was like, I gotta leave for 3 days because I've got to really focus on my book. I hope you guys are good. Dad's got it, and he did. And I think it's been actually really cool for them to be at an age now, because I started when they were very young, where they can see the payoff of that. That you guys really, you've seen the whole journey, and that's cool for me to have you seen it, especially at an ages where you guys can acknowledge that. And so thank you.
You were holding a full-time job, you were writing a book, and you were raising children. How
Yeah.
did you feel, Sir?
Yeah, which is why I had to leave the house in order to write the book. I literally had to leave. I could not write this book in the house because I did my copywriting a lot from the house. And I did obviously all my house stuff at the house. And it was like, I will think of 110 things to procrastinate about if I stay in this house and try to write this book. So I would go to like airport hotels, or I did a lot of writing in cafes and in San Francisco and in San Mateo. And that was actually kind of, again, it felt like I was like, had this like, other life that was kind of exciting, Yes.
Hi, JJ. I've known JJ for a long time, my wife and her best friends, and we all work in advertising. And you have to compartmentalize your life. When we work in advertising, we have deadlines and you have to be creative and all that. What's the difference in doing that? Like you said, we care about what we do in advertising, but it's writing software copy or design.
Yes.
So you can put it away a little easier. How is that like when you're writing something so personal and emotional? How do you?
It's so much easier to put the personal stuff away because you don't want to look at it. If anything, the deadlines keep you. I don't have the opportunity to put my copywriting away necessarily, and so it's like, oh, I'll shelve this really personal, really intense thing I'm writing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. So to me, it's harder to get back to it.
That's interesting.
Because first of all, I'm not getting paid. Second of all, nobody's looking for me. Nobody's asking for something for me on the back end other than me.
Right.
So Oh, I found it much harder to write.
Interesting.
More rewarding probably when it was felt like it was flowing, but also harder when it wasn't. I mean, it's like, it was very different. I'm sure they help each other. I'm sure there's like a dovetail in the like practice of it, but it never felt like they don't ever feel the same to me. Yeah.
Since you're responsible for doing all the publicity, how are you doing that? What are you doing?
So I hired a publicist out of New York. She was, I met her through Laura Munson, who has become a mentor, the one who wrote the book that is not my book. It's the, but they sound alike. And Emmy Battaglia is her name, and she's been great. And then I also hired someone she works with a lot, who's a social media person. And I didn't realize, I kind of thought I could have this social media stuff like under control because I'm in marketing and I know social media. It's like there's a whole world of Bookstagrammers and Goodreads giveaways. And I mean, she got me into all that, and that was pretty remarkable. And I'm so glad because I think when the social media first started out, we all could handle it, but now there's so many niches that you really need people that help you navigate it. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Very inspiring, and your story is really interesting. The last reading I went to right before yours was also responding on this books right there, Lessons in Chemistry. You're in a great company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she's also was in advertising and a copywriter. So my question is, was there anything you can identify that you learned from that world that you were able to go on over to writing lessons?
I think it's not surprising that I think copywriters edit as they write. Way more than most novelists do. Like I all my friends who are purely fiction writers or memoir actually tell me that they end up with a 800-page book that has to get down to 300 pages. And I was like, couldn't even get to 300 if I tried. So I think that there's just an editing process. I still was edited. I still hired a copy editor. I still had to be proofread. I still had to do all that, which I think is still really important, just to have other eyes. But I do think that there's a benefit in how much you are already editing as you're writing, because we're doing it so much and we're trying to keep it as like precise and concise and conversational as possible. So yeah, that would be the benefit.
I came from a magazine editing background, and it's very similar. Like I'm then mystified by friends of mine who say they can produce a messy first draft. Like I could never give myself permission to do that. I will write a chapter and I'll edit the hell out of it, and then I'll move on to the next chapter too. And then I'll come back and polish it. But I can't move on until I feel like it's pretty much ready to be shown to someone before I can go to the next chapter. Really different processes, just different operative styles.
Yeah. And I think a lot of novelists or fiction writers or even memoir, that they enjoy the messy first draft. Like they want to just get that out of their system. And I'm like, ugh, that sounds like you want to get dressed in your first really ugly outfit. You want to fix your outfit. But yeah, it's just different ways of thinking about it.
I'm going to speak about the writing process in terms of what you do every day. And as for me as a writer, I will not only outline everything, but I'm very A personality about this. I want to get a scene done. If I'm on deadline, I want to get a scene done a day for whatever the week is. And if I miss two, I'm going to do two the next week. I'm super disciplined by that. But I don't know if that's necessarily helpful. But that's how I do it. And I try to write like an hour a day. Just turn everything off. And I'd love to
Are
hear
these
your
deadlines
process.
set by you?
They're set by me. To
Okay,
get it
yeah, I
done.
don't do that. But I really admire people who do. I'm not organized in any part of my life. And I would help me a lot to be more like that. I think that there's not one way to run with the other. I just would sit down and write. And it could have been a week since the last time I wrote.
I'm twitching.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry, but I'm saying, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, and I think it is what works for you. I literally tried to do outlines, and it kind of messed up my flow because it was not how it worked in my head.
So wait, you wrote the book without an outline?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's what works, right? That's amazing.
But I knew I always knew what they were marching toward.
Okay.
And I also knew I wanted all these flashbacks. So it was like, the outline was almost kind of there for me in my head. I just didn't need to put it on paper because also if I put things on paper, it's not good. Just trust it.
Thank you so much.
I am so right in between the two of you.
Okay.
I have to have an outline or I feel lost. But I can't, like, when I hear about people who set an alarm and wake up at 5:30 every morning and write for 2 hours before the kids wake up, I just want to fight them. How is that even possible?
Or applaud them. I mean,
Yes,
either way.
both.
Just like I can't.
No, that's not, I can't. I'm a binge writer.
Mhm.
I always have 4 or 5 things going on at once. So I have to set aside like 4 days. And this is how I wrote most of my books when I was raising 2 daughters. I would set aside 4 days, their dad would take them, or sometimes I would drop them at school on a Friday. And then I would drive to a hotel, strategic Ventura, California, which was strategically positioned to be far enough away that they wouldn't drop in for dinner, but close enough that I could get home quickly in case of
Yes,
emergency.
perfect. That was
An
my,
hour
that
and
was my
15
San
minutes
Francisco airport hotel.
is the sweet spot, an hour and 15 minutes. And I would just check into the hotel room and only leave for meals and sometimes have them delivered. And I could get more done in 3 or 4 days than I could in probably 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. I would just stay really focused and write because I wouldn't be doing anything else. The sort of what upended that was COVID. I was on a book deadline.
Oh.
And we went under lockdown and pretty much everything else came to a halt. And my last book, The Aftergrief, it took me 2 years to write the first 120 pages and 4 months to write the next 220 pages because I wasn't doing anything else and I just sat at my dining room table.
Oh, because you were able to write more on COVID.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
I wasn't doing anything else and I realized, oh, that's how people do it. Like you don't have any other life except writing this book. Now that's a complete luxury because most of us have to have day jobs and we're raising children but my oldest was already out of the house. My youngest was a senior in high school. And I just, day after day, sat at the dining room table and got those pages out.
Yeah.
So next time I have 4 months with nothing else to do, I get a book.
Next pandemic. We're going to Good. We ready for some signage?
I think, are there any other questions or anything else anyone would like to contribute or to the conversation or say to JJ? Then I guess we're ready for some signage. May it be first of several or many.
Oh, well, we'll see. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everybody for being here. This is so cool. Thank you.
And there's only 3 copies of her book if you want one. You should go get it.
There's one on the
There's 4, so the people over here are gonna get them unless the people from here rush over.
They want me to.
I got you. I think they want to rest. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we already